So I've got a new toy, a new wide angle lens, which I'll talk about in a minute. And in this video, I want to share how I create amazing foregrounds with wide angle lenses.
A big thanks to Squarespace for sponsoring this week's video.
Morning everybody, fantastic to see you all again. So you probably know that I love wide angle photography. I've shot so many wide angle shots. My first book ever was called Vistas, which predominantly was just wide angle photography of amazing vistas all over Europe and around the world. And I love it, but it's difficult. It's not the easiest photography to do, especially finding a good foreground. So what I thought I'd do in this video is talk more about how I go about finding foregrounds. Because when I first started doing wide angle photography, my photos looked like this. You know, they had dead foregrounds, really boring skies, and everything was just contained in that middle bit. So I want to sort of explain my process of finding foregrounds both in the field. So I'm up in the Lake District. I've already done that bit now. I'm back in the studio and I want to show you a little bit more and share some more tips in the studio here. And we'll look at some of the photos I took when I was in the field. So before we go to the Lake District for the first part where I take my first photo, I just want to say the elephant in the room here, I'm going to be shooting a Hasselblad. Probably a lot of people didn't know I had a Hasselblad, but you've probably seen other videos that I've done where I share medium format versus full frame versus APS-C. And everyone seems to like those photos a lot. So I'm going to use my Hasselblad because they've got a new lens out, which is the 20-35. And to be honest, my Hasselblad, I didn't use as much as I liked because, and I do like using it because it slows me down a little bit, slows my photography down. You know, my Z8, my Nikon cameras are my workhorses. They're the ones that I take the majority of the time and I absolutely love them. But sometimes it's good to have a change and this sort of slows me down. But I only had one lens for it and I never had a wide angle lens. So this new wide angle lens, which is a 20-35, which I think is equivalent to around about 16 to 27. So a pretty nice wide angle range. I'm going to put this on and we'll go and try some photos with this. I'm also going to have my Z8 with me and also an APS-C camera with me as well, because I want to talk about the differences in focus and depth of field, because basically the great advantage of a medium format is that you get better dynamic range, a few more megapixels. But the disadvantage is that you don't have as much depth of field in the same field of view. So I want to talk a little bit more about that. Anyway, enough of me waffling on. Let's get into the field, to the Lake District. It was really, really cool.
Right, well, morning everyone. I'm going to start with a waterfall and try and do a wide angle shot in a waterfall, speak a little bit about that, and then over the next few days I'll probably try different types of wide angle shots. I am in the sort of heart of the Lake District, in a place that I've been once before, but I've not really photographed very much, but it's still incredibly beautiful, and this is what I've got ahead of me.
So I've just walked past this and it's quite a nice scene. There's a tree over there and a path. It's a really good example of something that isn't really a wide angle shot. So let me just explain. So I'm just going to put the video on here. And I'll start at just 24mm, and that looks pretty good really. So that's sort of wide angle, but if you want to go wider angle, which is what I'm going to be talking about mostly in this video, then you can see if I press wide angle now, then I've constrained the interesting bit to this sort of middle third. This has got a leading line, so it's sort of interesting. This rock makes it a little bit interesting. If I move forward to there really isn't a lot down here. And this sky is sort of interesting, but not really. So I feel like if I really wanted to take this shot, I'd probably have to walk over to those rocks, which I might do actually. We'll go and have a look at them. But yeah, this is too wide. What I do here, I mean, you could maybe turn it this way, which is slightly better, but then this is boring and this is boring. And that's the problem with wide angle photography. You've got to think about the elements in the scene that are boring, and you've got to try and make sure that the things you've got in the scene, because there's way more in the scene when you're shooting at 16mm, are interesting. But I'm going to just go over there and see if I can look at those rocks over there and see if we can get something. So what I usually do is I just take my phone and I put it on 0.5, so which is about 60mm, and I can just then move around the scene. It's way easier to do this because one of the things with wide angle photography is you very rarely shoot in like vertical like that, because you can see that
I'm going to have way too much sky. So most of the time you're shooting a bit down like that, where you're using the foreground. Now this is boring because this is boring here. But if I go around here, I might be able to start to use some of this rock here. And I think it looks pretty good. Just zoom in and out. Yeah, so I think, or you could go that way around, which I think looks pretty good as well. In fact, I really like it this way, because then you get these rocks here on the side, and I think the sky's not super interesting. So I think that's a pretty nice shot there. So I think I'll set my camera up here and we'll take that, and I can talk a little bit more about focus. Oh, this is exciting. Right, let me just jump into this wide angle shot. I'm shooting at the moment at, around about, it'll be equivalent to about 16mm full frame. And I really like this on this side. I get this rock in here, which is really nice. Got to be careful where the rock ends. I think that looks pretty good. The key thing is that I've got the tree pretty much in the middle. The thing is, when you've got something vertical like that, in wide angle photography, you don't want it on the edges because you're going to get really weird converging or diverging verticals. This sort of leads you through to the tree, which I think is good. And then these three rocks are really important down here because they sort of anchor that right-hand side of the scene. And I think it looks pretty good, but I'll just show you. So if I go over here, you can probably see that I start to go a bit weird in terms of vertically. Same as if I do this over here, you'll see the same problem. So a few things to think about. Right, I'm going to take the shot. So this is the new lens, the XCD 20-35, 16 to 27mm I think. So I've got this on, I framed it up, and the aspect ratio is slightly different on this. I quite like it though. This aspect ratio is pretty nice, I think. I'll talk a little bit more about choosing the aperture and thinking about focus, because this one I've not got things too far away, so I'm just going to stick with f11. It's about a 15th of a second, and then hopefully on this I don't need to worry too much about dynamic range because there's no real bright spots, and yeah, the dynamic range of this is amazing. So see what we get.
So I just took this photo here and I like it. I think you know, it's always in hindsight, isn't it, when you get back to the studio. So I don't think it was quite getting across what I wanted to get across, which was you need to be a little bit more over the top of the thing that you're taking to make the foreground a little bit of more of a dominant subject. But in a way, it's good that I showed something that didn't quite work, because I think it's good to show the good and the bad sometimes. So there's a few errors with this, I think. I don't think I'm over the top. I probably should have stuck to the left, rocks on the left-hand side and gone vertically. And then I also don't think I really connect very well with the foreground element of the rocks and the tree and then the distance. There's not that sort of perspective through the scene, which I think is so important with wide-angle photography. So just let me give you an example of what I mean by that. So this is a good example. I've shown this many times before, but this is from Madeira. But there's steps through the scene with this. So you start at the rock in the foreground here, and then you go onto these mid-ground rocks, and then all the way through to the distant rock there. And then again, when I was in Luscantire, this shot, even though it doesn't look like there's a lot in the mid-ground, it is a stepping stone to the distant mountain here. And I feel like these grasses are really close. I was actually pointing the camera right down to get that. And I think that really shows it. This one is another really good example where it's connecting you through. Probably less a good example, actually, now I'm looking at it. It almost connects you through. Ideally, maybe on this, I probably should have just been a little bit higher so that I could see the stepping stones through to the mid-ground in the scene, if you see what I mean. Anyway, I want to concentrate on the foreground and talk a little bit more about perspective and positioning of camera on the foreground. So over to me and a waterfall, trying not to fall in. I am sheltering because it started raining quite heavy. So I'm just going to shelter under this tree for a little bit, and then you can see I am by a river, not a very fast flowing river because we've had hardly any rain in the last few weeks in the Lake District. But I think I'm going to, without dying, because the rocks are so slippery, I'm going to try and find a bit of a composition here and shoot up the stream.
and see if I can talk a little bit more about how I do this with like a 16mm lens. So when I get to a location like this, a river like this, what I'm trying to do is find potential spots. So let me just show you over here. In this direction, you can see that, let's sort of scroll down, you can see that here there's some little bit of water, some nice flowing bits there. And what I want to try and do is use one of those in the foreground. I don't really want to go to the right of the bridge because there's some fallen trees and I feel like they're going to sort of block your view up through the scene. So you can see that down there there's a fallen tree. I actually don't think I'm going to be able to go this way because the rocks are really slippery. So I'm going to go back over the bridge and then try and get closer to these bits of water and see what we can shoot. So there's a nice bit of water there that I could have just coming down either side of the frame, and I think that'll look pretty good. There's also, it also goes round here, so I could use this as well and have like a diagonal coming through, which should be pretty good. Right, I'm gonna kneel down because otherwise I'm gonna fall in here. So I'm gonna show you on my phone again. So you can see that as soon as I get a bit closer now, I can use all this foreground area here. It looks really good. Now in this particular case, I don't think there's much up here, so I want more of this and less of this, I think. But this looks pretty good. But I actually also think I can go down there and get like a diagonal going through without, I don't know how I'm going to do that without dying. There we go. So yeah, so here I can use this diagonal here, and you can see I'm pointing down quite a lot. I could even go above it like that and have it going, it's stretching now almost 3/4 of the frame. If I go down low, it's probably about half the frame. So you've got to think, is there anything in this bit that's going to be more interesting? I think I'll make quite a good shot, so I'll probably shoot about there, I think. Okay, so I've got my Hasselblad here with the polarizing filter on. I think that's really important, having a polarizing filter on. And I'm shooting as wide as I can, which is effectively 16mm full frame, focusing on this central rock. And I'm going to show you the photo because I can't actually show you the shot itself. So I've got these 3 rocks. I'm being really careful about where those 3 rocks actually appear in the shot because I want they're quite nicely, you sort of jump through them to go through the scene. I think if anything, I probably need a little bit more at the top of the shot, but if anything, I need to go a little bit wider. So a 40mm would work quite well here. Okay, so I've moved my camera a little bit further closer to the waterfall now, and that's like sometimes really important. You've got to be careful with depth of field now though, because obviously I'm quite close here and I've got a lot of depth of field. You can cope with that in 2 ways. You can focus stack it, which I'm going to show in a different shot, or you can just up the aperture and focus in 3 different spots or 4 or 5 different spots, just to make sure that you've got what might be the optimum focus point. I did do a video and I'll put it here on using photo pills to work it all out, but I'm not going to go into that in too much detail in this video. Right, let's get the shot. This looks pretty good.
This image is the one that I took, and this one here. This one particularly I think is really interesting because I talked about the shape and the positioning of the stones, and now I've edited it, I think that's really important. I'm just focusing on the foreground part of this, not the distance. I don't think this makes a great image on its own, I feel like the location I was in, there wasn't really much above it, so there wasn't much to include within the scene, but it shows how I went about creating that foreground and positioning myself without falling in. So what I really like is that these two rocks are sort of diagonally opposed at the bottom, and then the diagonal goes the other way. So it's almost like a little S-curve, I suppose, going up, and then the diagonal from the bottom right goes through the scene. And I think that works really well, having that. If that rock on the left-hand side wasn't there, I think it would be very unbalanced, but that rock just sort of draws your eye in a little bit. And I think it's really important when you're looking at foregrounds to try and create some semblance of balance in there. Another waterfall that I went to, this was incredible actually in Skye, was this one. It's a really famous waterfall and been photographed many times before, but this was the highest I've ever seen the water. And what I've tried to do in here is have the water get really close. I was really on top of it, pointing right down. And you know, that mountain is very close to me as well. And that's something that's really important if you're talking about the distance in a wide angle shot. But what makes this is that your eye's drawn from left to right, which is a really good direction because that's the way in the Western world anyway, we read, and then draws you round and takes you to that mountain in the background. So with the foreground, what you're trying to do is you're trying to direct the viewer's eye into a particular part of the scene. And this is another good example of these reeds. I was right over the top of them. Literally, my camera was just pointing down like this at them, and it really made a difference. Anyway, I'm exploring some new areas. Let's get back out on location, where with the Hasselblad and this new lens, I get probably what is my favourite shot of the trip.
So I'm just shooting this path here, and this is a good example of probably something that works quite well at sort of 16mm and also quite well at 24mm, and I'll explain the differences. So probably the best is for me just to put the photos on here, and so when I've got 20mm on, so according to 16mm, I've got the camera pointed a lot further down and the distance just looks so much further away. But at 24mm, I can't get all this really nice cobble in at the bottom here, but I can get the buildings, the farm buildings, a little bit closer. I think this is interesting. The foreground's interesting here, so it does make a really wide angle shot, but you lose out in the sheep. Oh, the sheep coming over there. Let me see if I can get them.
Right, it's next morning now, and I've come to the Langdales, which is one of my favourite areas, and I'm actually going to go to a new bit, which is just a mound over there, just to see if I can get some of the rocks and the Langdale Pikes in the background. There's a slight chance, a very slight chance of sunrise. There's a little bit of colour in the sky, but I think it's very slight and it's more likely to rain. Anyway, let's go and have a look. So this path here, I'm just going to show you a great example of what I think works maybe a little bit better vertical than horizontal when you're going wide angle, and it's not really obvious. So I've just set my camera up here, and I'll show you with my phone actually. If I go up here, so I've got my camera here, and basically if I go to vertical, then I can get the sky looking really nice, sort of, and then the path leading in. So I feel like this is way better to shoot vertically than it is horizontally. Not always shots are, but this one definitely is. So I'm going to set up my XCD with the 20 to 35 lens, and I think this will look absolutely fantastic. Okay, so I have just found a wide angle shot. I'm actually recording a different video at the moment, but I thought I'd just show you this in this video because it's a pretty good example of just, you know, showing you how close I get to, as you can see here, an actual foreground. And to be honest, I'm still a little bit further away than I usually am, but I'm close enough that I'm going to have to focus stack this. So I thought I'd show you focus stacking it. It's not the best ever composition, but if you sort of see this video that I just recorded, it's a good idea just to move around. So I just move forward here from the grassy bit to this rocky bit, because this rocky bit is good, and then I filled the bottom of the frame with the rocky bit, which I think looks really good. But then to focus stack, basically what I'm going to do is I'm going to focus sort of on this rock here, and that's going to be one focus. Then I'm going to focus sort of the mid-ground, or the near mid-ground, I'd say, not the far mid-ground, and then the distance. And I'm going to shoot that at 2 different apertures. I'm going to shoot it at f13 and f8, because I might be able to get away with f8, which will ultimately result in a sharper picture. I'll probably actually do a third one. I'll do f16 as well, because I'm not familiar with this lens yet and just how it performs at different apertures, so I can just experiment a little bit here. And then I'll just put them all together in Lightroom. And if you're interested in how to focus stack in in Photoshop, then I'll put a link up here somewhere. Right, again, as I'm making another video, I'm just going to do loads of shots for this video, but this is really an interesting way of explaining the difference that a wide angle can make to a scene. So we've got this rock here, and as you're looking at it from there, it's very straight on, so it sort of blocks the viewer. So you want to come to the side a little bit. But if I just show you, and if I just go to like about, maybe just about 14 or, no, but maybe about, if I just go to about 16, 17 millimeters, and then I'm just going to video, and so I'm going to go a little bit further away to start with, so about here, and all I'm going to do is move forward and just watch what happens to the rock. So watch the line of the rock as I'm moving forward. Can you see it's going more diagonal? And then if I just go a bit wider now, so I'll go to about 16 mil, you can see that it's getting more diagonal in the shot. So it's going like that, from like that, I go back again, and it's flatter. So that's why I like to go right over the shot, because then you can create diagonals in the scene. So if I came around this way a little bit, I'd make a bigger diagonal that way, it'd go flatter, and then backwards it'd go flatter as well. So top tip when doing super wide angle shots.
So I hope you found that useful in terms of the positioning and how you get those diagonals when you go more over the shot. And if you think about it, what happens is it just changes the perspective of lines as you go closer to them. So the more you turn your camera down and you're over the top something, the more you're going to get those diagonals, which can really help any scene. Anyway, I also took this shot here, which I really like. I think that the rocks positioned diagonally across from the main subject in the background, this mountain, works really, really well. There's a lot of open space around the rocks, which gives them a sense of breathing. I really like that as well. I really enjoyed using this lens on the Hasselblad as well. I've got a few top tips, just so don't go anywhere. Before I go through those, I just want to say that I've got my presets out now, my woodland presets. I sent an email out on it, but I also wanted to mention it on my YouTube channel. I've worked for over 5-6 years on these, and they're now available for sale on my website. They allow you to just get a first go on your woodland images. It's what I've used for the last 3 or 4 years. Like I say, I've been developing them for a long time as that first starting point, which is often really difficult when you're editing. I've had some really good feedback so far from them. They're available for £30 at the moment. There's a link in the description. So there's a very hefty discount of £20. And yeah, I built those, I put those on. The way I'm selling those is through Squarespace. So that's on my website here, using the Squarespace commerce tools, which are super, super easy to use. Squarespace is sponsoring this week's website, and if you're looking for a website or you're looking to set up a domain, then make sure you head over to squarespace.com/Nigel or use offer code Nigel to get 10% off your Squarespace site. It really has been very easy to sell my presets and also my ebooks through Squarespace as well as share my images. Right, back to Lightroom. So there's a few other things that I just want to talk about. The main one is dead space in your foreground. So this is a really good example, this image here, where I feel like this is breathing space. So I've got quite a lot of breathing space around these rocks, which I think works really well. But sometimes you can get dead space, and that dead space is a good example is this one, the one that I took here. I feel like this space in the bottom right is just not doing a lot. So sometimes you get that with foreground and sometimes you get that with the sky. So it's something to really watch out for. It's the biggest mistake I see with any foregrounds where you're using a wide angle lens. So you've got to be really close to what you're shooting, a little bit more over the top of it, and make sure it's interesting, it's not too cluttered, and you don't have the dead space like I've got here. Because really what I could argue on this image is it would be better if I just cropped it in to like there. And then I've changed it from a really wide angle lens to like a 25-26mm, so it's not using that wide angle to its best ability. So look for that, look for dead space. That's it for this week. I hope you've enjoyed it. I'll put a link to the Hasselblad lens as well in case you're feeling of really treating yourself. And until next Sunday, well, next but one Sunday, bye. Give it a thumbs up and subscribe as well.